Hey, it's Jay from Pacific Northwest Sports. Hope you enjoy the newest podcast. If you ever want a wall like mine, please check out Green Gridiron. They're an amazing company capable of making any of the helmets you see or any helmet you can imagine. Their link is below and the QR code is right here. As always, you can check us out on any of our social medias. Enjoy! All right, we are here with Western Washington rugby player Max Stone. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Just taking some summer classes, so just finishing up that quarter, and doing some off-season training and that kind of stuff. But nice and easy.
What does training look like for a rugby player?
So it kind of varies. I guess the sort of level you play at and the intensity that you play with, but typically you'll do in season you'll have about 3 field sessions a week, and then you'll do about 2 S&C sessions, then you'll have a game and then an off day. So pretty straightforward. And yeah, I mean the on-field sessions are kind of, a mix of individual work-ons and then team stuff. So pretty similar to any other sport, really.
For rugby, there's different types of rugby, right? There's sevens, there's other different variations. What are you participating in?
So we play rugby union as opposed to league, which tends to be the more sort of worldwide popular sport, where you have either 15, you can play 15s rugby union, you can play sevens. We play both. Sort of our main season consists of 15s, which is a lot more sort of technical, precise, and sort of chess-like game, I describe it as, whereas sevens are playing more checkers, and it's a lot more based on sort of athletics and that kind of stuff. And that's the sport where you definitely see a lot of crossover from other sports. But yeah, we play 15s typically from about September to April, and then April is when we'll pick up a bit of sevens.
Nice. So you have 2 seasons essentially that you're playing.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what was the journey like getting to Western Washington? Where'd you start playing rugby, and then where'd you know, I want to go over here and play some ball?
Yeah, I started playing at my high school, which was in Surrey, British Columbia, so at Earl Marriott Secondary, and it's home to probably one of the best public school programs at a high school in. I mean, you could say even definitely Canada. It's definitely up there in North America as a whole. They produced a lot of current guys who are playing pro or played high level at a national level, and so I grew up playing there. Played grade 8 through all the way to 12, with my grade 11, 12 year kind of being cut short by COVID. And then I was looking at schools, deciding where I was going to take my game at a post-secondary level, and it was either sort of down between University of British Columbia and Western, and the opportunity kind of came to go to Western, and to get a switch of scenery and whatnot, and never looked back.
Why Western though? Why not British Columbia?
Well, so Western, that's actually interesting. My high school coach, his high school coach is the active director of rugby down at Western. And he's, Paul Horn's his name, and he's sort of a stalwart sort of figure of rugby in the Pacific Northwest as a whole. Helped found a lot of the local clubs, and coached at the age grade national level, and senior men's stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it'd be a great option to kind of get a switch of scenery. UBC was pretty. I'd been there quite a few times, and it just wasn't really too big of a school. I wanted something kind of smaller. So yeah.
Nice. So Paul Horn is your coach. Things are obviously going great up here. What's interesting is I don't think people know not that many universities actually sponsor their lacrosse team. So there's not that many of them around, right? Like UW doesn't have that advantage. Central Washington does.
Rugby, yeah. the sort of collegiate rugby landscape is a very convoluted and complicated one. There's on the men's side of things, that's what I'm familiar with. You sort of have two split organizations, one that's aligned with USA Rugby, the other that's aligned as a separate organization called the NCR, National Collegiate Rugby. And as far as the Collegiate Rugby Association of America goes, the one that's aligned with USA Rugby, there's sort of your D1A level, which is the highest level of college rugby in the U.S., and that's going to be more or less all your varsity programs. So like Cal, Central is really the only one in the Pacific Northwest, and then you have a couple in the Rockies, and then you have your sort of big programs like Navy, Army, Life, and so on the East Coast. But yeah, Western is we're a club sport. We are we have a very generous alumni who helps us compete at a sort of quasi varsity level. We travel, we do all those kinds of things, and a lot of that's because of our alumni. But there are a lot of clubs who don't really have that and who are just sort of club sports at their university and who are trying to get by and compete. And
Nice. So what makes you love rugby?
Well, I grew up playing soccer, and really enjoyed it for the time that I played it. But rugby just brought a different kind of challenge. It's a game that's played with both your hands and your feet. It's there's two different aspects to it, and it's a very calculated game. The strategy is definitely a very intriguing part for me, because there's a lot that goes into your formation, your attack structure, your defensive structure, and as somebody who's always liked critical thinking and analyticity and all that, rugby just kind of got me really interested, and I've stayed interested ever since.
Did it come naturally to you? Was it something you had to work on?
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure. Like grade 8, I think of the days of playing grade 8 rugby. It's more of just running and tackling fest than anything else. There's not a lot of actual rugby being played, at least over in North America. But the sort of physicality and the just running with the ball, and the kicking aspect, that sort of came naturally to me. But I mean, it's one of those games that it just takes so long to sort of master and get better at, and that's something that I'd like to eventually work towards of really understanding and being able to play the game at that high of a level. But I mean, it's still obviously a work in progress.
Do you think you have the potential to play at the next level?
I'm not too sure. I think a lot of it's going to come down to where I put my time and whether or not I can improve my game. I mean, I'm not, one thing with rugby is size is a big motivator for people to move on to the next level. And I'm only about 5'9". I'm not a huge guy, and I've never been the quickest guy, but there are guys who play at the next level who might not have the size, but they're just very keen and they understand the game very well. And I think that's definitely my biggest strength. So if I can keep honing that, maybe one day, but who knows.
So a little earlier, you mentioned that there's two different kind of sides of rugby for men, so the collegiate level. Can you dive into that a little bit deeper? You said Central's on one end and Western's on the other. Can you explain that a little bit more for people?
Right. So there's two different governing bodies, and the two different governing bodies have different approaches to how they want rugby to look. The NCR, which is a primarily East Coast organization, plays all their rugby in the fall, all their 15s, that is, and then they reserve the spring for sevens. Whereas the CRAA in the USA Rugby affiliated group. They play their 15s sort of in the fall and the spring, and then they play a bit of sevens at the end. And then as far as within those organizations themselves, there's tiering of how, I guess, good and then also funded those programs are. So D1A, that's your sort of highest level. The people who win that, they're the national champions. They're, that's the cream of the crop when it comes to college rugby in the U.S. And then you have D1AA, which are sort of they're very good programs as far as college rugby goes, but they're usually club sports. They're not funded like varsity programs. And then you have D2 in small schools, which are often some of them might be varsity, but often they're just smaller liberal arts universities or those kind of schools. And so Western's at the D1AA level right now.
Okay. And when you guys are going to play, who are some of the teams you guys play?
Yeah, so we play UW, we play University of Oregon, we play Oregon State University, Boise State University. We play some teams down in California in sort of cross-divisional matches. And then we try to get games in against some of the Canadian competition as well.
Well, I mean, you're so close to the border. Hopefully you guys can get them.
Exactly, yeah. And there's a lot of good rugby that's, played up there. And some of the, best rugby players in Canada are coming out of, the men's competition in British Columbia. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent up there. And it's nice to play them or play some of their, lower level teams when we can.
Rugby's a quickly growing game. It's really started to grow over here in the West Coast and really started to grow just more at a national level. As someone who's kind of been around it for a while, are you excited to see that happen? Do you kind of know what the next step you think is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting getting, having the MLR be an infrastructure that's, stood the test of at least like 5 or 6 years is something that's really promising. And it's definitely, last season had a really solid season and grew a fair amount. And then, getting the, World Cup in the future. I mean, that's another, huge plus. Now, I think the main question is whether or not the U.S. and Canada can take like a similar route to what the MLS did, in sort of the early 2000s. Because, I mean, you look at when the MLS started, what they were, selling franchises for were pennies. And now, you see franchises, they're like, it's like $500 million, you know what I mean? But if rugby can pick up that, its fair share of the market, then, it's only ups from there.
So coming from someone who knows little to nothing about rugby, are there professional teams throughout the United States?
Yeah, so the Major League Rugby, which is the professional organization in sort of the U.S. and Canada, has, I believe it's 8 teams. Could be 10. I think it's 8. And they've got there's one team in Toronto. There's 3 teams in Texas. There's a team in New York and New England and New York. San Diego has a team. Seattle has a team. Salt
Lake City has a team, right? Am I mistaken about that?
I don't think so. Utah has a team.
Yeah, Warriors Rugby.
Warriors, yeah, Utah Warriors. They have a team. And they just finished their league up a couple months ago. It's that's the one competition that's in North America. There's also a competition that's in another professional competition in the Americas, where professional teams from South America play other professional teams from South America, and then the American Raptors, who used to be in the MLR as the Glendale Raptors, are a member of that organization. And then you have professional teams all over Europe and New Zealand and Australia and so forth. But that's the professional organization in North America.
Interesting. And so do they play sevens or do they play 15s?
They play 15s. So as far as sevens goes, there's a newly formed professional sevens, or it's semi-professional professional sevens league called PR Sevens, Premier Rugby Sevens, which started in the last couple of years, but really had its like breakout year this year. And they've got another like I think it's almost a dozen, maybe it's like eight. I think it's 8 to 12 teams who play in different divisions, and then compete sort of all around the country. I think it's pretty much everything's based in the U.S. So that's the Professional Sevens League, and then there's also the Sevens Circuit, which is ran by World Rugby, and it's essentially U.S. The U.S. has a team, Canada has a team, France, all the Preno rugby powers have a team, and they'll travel from sort of country to country playing tournaments every couple of weeks during their season, and that's another sort of big rugby event. Vancouver typically hosts one of the tournaments, and then I think LA has one of them or something like that.
So, again, not knowing rugby too much, but I would imagine sevens and 15s are pretty different in terms of strategy and whatnot.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, sevens it's a quick game, so it's a 14-minute game. So I mean, just from a commercial end, a seven, you're not going to see a sevens game. You're going to see a sevens tournament, and that's how pretty much all sevens is played. And it's a lot quicker. It relies on a lot more speed, sort of athleticism, and sort of quick decision making. And whereas 15s is a lot more monotonous, it's a lot more territory. You're playing a lot more territory. You see a lot more kicking in 15s, especially recently. And that's just because teams' defenses are so reliable, especially at a high level in 15s, that you're fine giving the other team the ball deep in their end because you're going to play defense, and maybe you'll win a penalty, maybe they'll turn the ball over, and you'd rather be in their end and be able to convert them. It's the same thing as punting, kind of in football, more or less, but you're just not forced to, I guess.
Can you give us a breakdown of the positions on sevens and 15s and what they're responsible for?
Yeah, so I'll start with sevens. So sevens, you have 3 forwards, and you have 4 backs. Again, your forwards, they're typically bigger guys, but in sevens they don't really need to be because your scrums are only 3 against 3. So in 15s, when you have an 8-person against 8-person scrum, there's a lot more force being generated, and they're not having to move around the field as much. So in 15s, you look at a prop, and they're 250 to 300 and 300 pounds. And your locks are probably the same thing, and your back row is probably a little bit less. But in sevens, they can be a lot smaller because you just want people who are fast, so usually it's tall and fast. So your 2 props and your hooker in that setup, their main job is just to maintain ball at scrum time, when the ball in the line out, which is when the ball goes into touch or out of the field. But more or less on a sevens. On a 7 sort of setup, all your players are doing very similar things, with the exception of maybe your wingers and your halfbacks, who are part of your backs, who are your wingers are going to be more your faster guys, and your halfbacks are going to be more of your like creative playmaking type decision makers. But it's a lot more unified. There's a lot less differentiation between player profiles when it comes to their size. And then as for 15s, you get a lot more sort of specificity in what players do on the field and what they're supposed to, look like. So your 1 through 8. So 1 through 8, those are your forwards, and they're going to be sort of tranched into 3 different groups. So your front row, those are the guys who are taking the brunt of the load at scrum time, and those are going to be your 2 biggest guys, often, upwards of 300 pounds, strong as an ox, and at set piece, maintain, win the ball. And then during the game in open play, they're just taking very short carries, looking to win close meters, and then once you get to the other end of the field, once you're on your opposition's 5 meters out, that's when they're just really crunching in those last couple meters. Your locks are the guys that you're going to throw up in the line out typically. They're the big, tall guys that are going to do similar stuff in the contact area. And then your back row are more or less just they're sort of your big tacklers on the field. They're going to be doing a lot of the dirty work at the ruck. And they're often going to be your forwards that can do a lot of the ball running too in space. And then your 9 and your 10, so starting with the backs now, your 9 and your 10 are going to be your decision makers. Your 9 is going to travel to each ruck and then service the ball out either to the forwards or to the 10 or to another back. And then your 10 is going to be typically or most often your kicker, going to sort of set the attacking structure. The ball is typically going to go through them on attack. Centers, those are going to be your bigger backs that are going to do a lot of crash work. They're going to run a lot of the hard lines, similar to something like maybe a running back type thing on attack. And then your wingers are going to be your fast guys. Those guys are going to, do everything from a kick chase to, winning those meters on the outside. And your fullback, often going to be a bigger guy, but not always. Could be a smaller guy that's, usually fast, able to, so on your defensive scheme, you're going to have a whole line of players and then 1 to 3 guys at the back. And they're going to be having to travel those meters, make, open field tackles, and they're often going to have a pretty good kicking game too.
Okay. Lots of detail inside of the game.
It's a not so brief overview.
There was a phenomenon going on right around 2015-ish where the thought process was these rugby players were coming into the NFL and getting tryouts, and that there might be a new way for rugby to be able to convert to the NFL. Sure. I don't know if you remember the player, but his name was Jared Hayne. He apparently was a really good rugby player, one of the best. And he went over to the NFL and he played with the San Francisco 49ers for a little bit, and he didn't quite make it. What are some of the main differences that you're seeing in the game beyond the equipment and all that? But why do you think some people think it can work and they can come over seamlessly, and why others say it'll never work?
I think it comes down to a lot of things. I mean, you do see guys from other sports come in and start playing rugby, and some even professionally now, especially with sevens, just because of how tailored sevens is to athletes. But when it comes to doing the opposite, I think a big part of it is how specialized or how unspecialized rugby players have to be. So they're often really, you look at some of the wingers, they're just as fast as a NFL wide receiver, but they don't just have to run and catch balls. They have to tackle, often kick, often they're passing. They're doing a lot more different skills and different athletic maneuvers, whereas I think football, you're a lot more specialized into what you have to do. So I guess you're, instead of coming, doing the one way from being hyper specialized and sort of expanding your skill set out, I think it might be a lot more difficult to come from a sport where you might have all these assets and you're not as hyper specialized, but to try to sort of hone those in through a couple of really unique things. And maybe it's that it's just more difficult to do that once you've done all this and you haven't been focusing on hyper specializing what you're doing your whole career. But
yeah, looking at Jared Hayne a little bit, it said that he played, he was one of the NRL's top players, and then he ended up representing Fiji Sevens in rugby union.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And you see so many guys that are, say they played, college football or something like that and trying out rugby. I mean, on our team, we've got tons of guys who, grew up wrestlers in high school or, tried out college football or soccer, and it just wasn't for them. And they come to rugby and they love it, and they're absolute studs, just because they had they're athletes first of all, but also they have these really refined skills that they're able to dominate in rugby with, and then they can also easily branch off and work on these other sort of more softer skills that they might not have had.
It sounds like it's a very much a team game, but individually, if you're really good, you have a chance to become a well-polished player overall. And it sounds like you need a lot of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing about rugby is if you can, especially at a really high level, like you look at the national level. I mean, you can have 15 studs. Like in sevens, you can have 7 studs, and they'll probably make it work. Just because it just it's way more of a raw game. But in 15s, the amount of planning that goes into game plans and how you're going to break open a defense, and the amount of unification you need on guys being where they're supposed to be. I mean, it's you just can't do it without that. And so you need a bit of both. You need these well-refined players, but I mean, often you'll see that if a team has like 5 studs and they just don't have a good game plan, but if you have a team that has 15 solid rugby players, that team with 15 solid rugby players is going to win, just because if they can tackle, if they can pass the ball well and move it well, then that's how they're going to beat the other team.
Interesting. So at your core, when you reflect on rugby and what won you over, what makes you love it?
There's a couple things. I think the traditions and the sort of culture around rugby, I think, is unlike any other sport. The sort of camaraderie after a game. You go over to the team, you share your words, and it's just like it's an automatic respect that you have for that other person across the field in the other jersey, but also it's the sort of how basic of a game it is. There are all the complicated, convoluted rules, but at the end of the day, it's just I try to put my ball on your end of the field, you try to put the same ball on the other end of the field, and that's all it is. And I think it's that simplicity and the goal of the game that makes it such a challenge to improve and to sort of create more sort of unique strategies in how you win that game. That really appeals to me.
Amazing. So I want to ask you 5 questions just to end the podcast.
Sure.
I'll ask everyone these same 5 questions. So question number 1, you're at a gas station. You're about to go on an 8-hour road trip. It's going to be a long one. What's your go-to drink and your go-to snack?
It's got to be a gallon of water. And then snack, I'm going to go with almonds. Almonds. I love bringing almonds.
Salted, fire roasted?
I'm going just roasted, unsalted.
Wow. All right.
No.
Who's your favorite athlete of all time?
Johnny Sexton. He currently plays 10 for Ireland. He's old, but he is just tough as nails, and he's probably the most one of the most efficient, I think, athletes that is out there right now.
There was that might be the quickest answer anybody has given me. Usually they gotta wait a second and give me like, but you were
that's been the answer for a while.
All right, what's your favorite time of the year?
It's winter for sure.
Why?
I like the cold.
Okay. All righty. Who's your favorite sports team? Any sport at the high school, the college, and the professional level, but can't pick anyone you've played for or you've helped coach for.
Okay. And one at each, or just one?
Well, one of each level.
One of each level. Okay. All right. Well, I'll start from the top down. So, at the sort of international level, I love Ireland's rugby team. At the collegiate level, I can't say. I'm not really big on football. Or yeah, I don't really watch a lot of collegiate sports other than rugby. But rugby, other than Western, I'd have to go with. Um, I'd go with UBC's rugby team. I think they're a really good program, and they've just been so dominant in the past decade that I'd go with them. And then high school, let's see. It's a tough one. I would. I mean, I'd probably go with the. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. Not one that you haven't coached or played for. That's the tough stipulation. One team that always. Uh, you know what? I'll go with the local high school rugby club that we've got up here, which is based out of Ferndale, Chuckanut Bay Rugby Club, which was founded by by some Western Washington rugby players in 1973. So I'll go with those guys. They're just cool. They wear orange and blue, and yeah, I played a bit with the men's team, but the high school team I never played with. So I'll go with the high school team.
All righty, there we go. Last question: do you like country music at all?
I do. I definitely I prefer like more Western ballad type music, but yeah, for sure.
Okay. Do you know who Luke Combs is?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so he has a song called "Doing This," and it says, "Someone asked me once in an interview, what was growing up like? Where'd you go to school? And what would you do if you weren't doing this?" So my question to you is, what would you be doing if you weren't playing rugby?
I don't know. I don't think I would have followed through playing soccer at any like higher levels. So um honestly, I'd probably be just I'd probably be doing a similar thing as I'm doing now. I don't know, because the thing about rugby is and Western is Western really I didn't come in I definitely didn't come into Western the person I am today, and I think a lot of the change that I've had was specific to this place, this team, this school. So I think I would have been probably a lot more just I don't know. I don't think I would have been the person I am today, and I don't think that I would have been having nearly as much fun as I am now and enjoying myself nearly as much as I am.